on to video number 2. Now, this video is going to walk you through the roles and responsibilities of a ton of different working dogs. In this video specifically, we are going to cover 3 types of dogs: ESAs, or emotional support animals, therapy dogs, and service dogs. And Tara and I are going to walk you through what all the different training looks like. But just know in this video series, we are spotlighting therapy dogs. But because there's a lot of confusion around the 3, we wanted to explain those in a video. So we're going to start with ESAs. In regards to training, ESAs are at the very bottom, then there's therapy dogs, then there's service dogs. So an ESA, again, is an emotional support animal. And if you're wondering, Christina, why are you looking down? It's because there's a lot of information that we need to cover and we don't want to miss anything. So if Tara and I look down, just know we have notes. So with an ESA, that is a companion animal that provides therapeutic benefit to one person that has a mental or a psychiatric disability. And that can be any animal. It can be a dog, a cat. We've seen horses that are ESAs, everything. And really what this animal, I shouldn't just say dog, but what this animal does is it provides emotional and mental support for that person. ESAs reduce anxiety, they ease depression. They really are so helpful when used appropriately. Now, an ESA becomes an ESA not because of formal training. They do not require any formal training, but they are you do need formal or written consent from a mental health care provider stating that your animal provides that emotional relief for you. Now, an example of an ESA, let's say a person has severe depression and their dog helps them cope and work through the challenging days that they have and challenging circumstances that they face. That's an ESA. Normally, they're not wearing a vest. Some can. You can see emotional support on them, but for the most part, they really don't wear vests. Okay, now Tara, if you want to talk about therapy dogs.
Okay, the best one I have to say, because not
we're biased
or anything, but the best kind is the therapy kind. No, I'm kidding. So I am excited to talk about therapy dogs, though. So therapy dogs obviously are who we are spotlighting on this tour, and
yes,
the most basic definition of a therapy dog is a dog that is there to provide comfort to someone in need. And that could be so varied. There are so many ways that a dog can provide comfort to others. So like I had mentioned in the first video, we went through a lot of training. And so therapy dogs go through rigorous training to make sure that they can be obedient and behave well in a variety of public settings. And so not only does the dog go through a lot of training, so does the handler. And so some would even argue that I had to get trained even more so than Juno to kind of know what, to know what to look for, not only in your dog, but just, to anticipate things. It's a lot for the person and also the dog. And so together, you and your dog, you make a therapy dog team. The dog can't volunteer by themselves, and neither can you. So the only way that this works is if you guys work together.
That's a great point.
So something else about therapy dogs, really what I tell people, I get this question a lot, is that think of therapy dogs as essentially the opposite of ESAs and service dogs. Therapy dogs are there to help as many people as possible. And the other types of dogs out there, they're there to solve a specific problem for a specific individual. Therapy dogs are there just to make as many people happy as they can. Some basic things, differences between therapy dogs, especially from ESAs and also service dogs, which I'll touch on in a minute, is that therapy dogs are not given any special privileges. This is something that people get confused about a lot. Therapy dogs have to be trained to be in public, but that's it. They're allowed to be in specific areas, but they don't get any special privileges. You can't just take your therapy dog into a restaurant. They're not allowed on planes. They, for all intents and purposes, other than to be there in a public setting, they have to follow the same rules that a personal pet would. So therapy dog teams volunteer in a variety of settings. And so they could be libraries and hospitals and assisted living areas. And so some examples would be, so in a library, they have reading programs where the dogs sit with children to help them learn to read. Or in my case, we visit a hospital and we visit with patients and families and nurses. And also, in assisted living areas, they really help the elderly, just provide companionship and company and help, lift their day and brighten their spirits.
And therapy dogs too, they will also serve in crisis relief and disaster situations. So you'll see if there's, God forbid, a very tragic event, they actually will deploy therapy dog teams to go and serve people that have been involved in something like a shooting or anything like that.
Yeah. And I mean, we mentioned on training too, and especially with crisis, like you're saying, not only is there a ton of training to become a therapy dog, but if you want to work specifically in crisis work, there's like a whole nother layer of work and training that you need to do. So it's a highly, highly specialized volunteer space, but it's really, really needed.
And to speak on that too, with therapy dog training, and we will get into this in a later video, but they're almost like there's ESA therapy dog, service dog. Within the therapy dog space, there's certain levels in there. So you can start out on the base and just do reading programs or visit fire stations or police stations. And then if you want to go up a notch and do some more training, there's what you and Juno do, which is hospitals, airports, things that require much more clearance, much more liability insurance. And then stepping up one more in those disaster relief situations, you have to think as a therapy dog team, like we'll take Nash and I, for example. As much as I would love to do that, we are not trained to do that. So in a situation like that, we would be doing more harm than good probably by showing up in a situation like that because we're not trained, because that kind of thing is very specific. And the way that the dog is trained to handle a setting like that, we also need to be trained as handlers to be able to provide the emotional relief to the person as well, and just know what to look for.
Yeah, for sure.
And two, therapy dogs are almost always wearing a please pet me vest, which is something that a lot of people they are always, when they see Nash on tour, they're like, can I pet him? And then they get closer and they're like, his vest says, please pet me. So that's a really easy indication to tell the difference between a therapy dog and a service dog that you're going to cover next.
Right. I was going to say, oh my gosh, like perfect segue. Yes. So that is right away the indicator. Most often we service dogs. So it's the type of dog that we're most familiar with. Everybody knows what a service dog looks like. They usually wear a very official vest, and the vest usually says, do not pet me. I'm a service dog. And so that's why when we do go out and we volunteer as therapy teams, right? I mean, it's a good thing that the public kind of hesitates and they ask you first, because they have been trained to know that most often the service dogs are not to be approached. The reason service dogs aren't to be approached is because they are highly trained to help one person with a specific disability or task or whatever that dog is there for. The point is that that dog is there to help that one person. So because of that, the dog is not supposed to be visiting with other people. That dog is supposed to be laser focused on its owner at all times. These dogs, because of that, are allowed, they have special privileges. I mean, I believe it's like a federal law. So they are allowed to go, they're allowed to go into restaurants and pretty much anywhere their owner needs and wants to go, that dog is allowed to go with them. I will say that I do have a friend who has a certified service dog. And, it doesn't mean that you can just like walk through life and have your dog with you all the time. You have to have proper documentation and paperwork on you to show whatever, may say restaurant or, store, or anytime somebody approaches you and asks and questions, you have to have that certification and that paperwork on you to prove that your dog is a service dog. So it's, especially like, dogs are never allowed in like grocery stores, but they would be allowed if that dog was a service dog. So like I said, you absolutely will see, they just look more official. They have a more official looking vest usually on them. And that vest will say, do not pet me. And the best thing that you can do is you have to respect that dog's space and that dog's job, because that dog's job is to help its owner get through life in whatever way, shape, or form that owner needs that dog. That's that dog's specific purpose. And that's why we as the public are not supposed to interfere with that at all. So
it's hard because sometimes they're so cute and you're just like, I just want to pet you, but you can't, because they're working, and I think that's something that we should all remember. So anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I have seen instances where, if the owner, the point is you have to get permission. If the owner says, yes, it's okay, that owner might give a cue to their dog to let them know, like, okay, we're on a break. You're allowed to go say hi. But you can't just assume. You have to respect those boundaries, and you have to get permission first.
Right.
So I just wanted to touch on a couple examples. I would guess that the most common one we've all seen is like a seeing eye dog. Those are service dogs for blind people, and that dog is that person's eyes. Another really good way that service dogs are incorporated is, we've seen them where they're trained to detect when someone's going to have a seizure. I've even seen stories where dogs can detect when they're going to have a stroke or just any kind of like medical episode, which is crazy. So yeah, those are examples of specific medical conditions that those dogs are highly, highly trained to assist with.
I love that you covered everything, Tara. And I think that's so important that we always keep an eye out for what their vest says, because they can be there to provide joy and snuggles like a therapy dog, or they can be working, and we need to keep our distance, even though they're probably so cute. Because when you see a dog in Target, you're like, oh my gosh.
I know.
But I think just, from whether we want to do therapy dog work or not, just by being a civilian out in society, it's so important to respect boundaries and just make sure you're just thinking twice, I think is my I don't know what I would say. Just keep an eye out.
Yeah.
But also too, I mean, there's tons more working dogs. I mean, we look at police dogs, bomb dogs, detection dogs, dogs that are working with a policeman in the airport. That's a completely different training that we are not going to touch on in these videos. And that's because they're related to very specific government work. And that's not what we're going to cover. So, all right. Yeah, that's what we've got. So just keep in mind what the difference between ESAs, therapy dogs, and service dogs are.